everyone, welcome once again to Bat Chat. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxi.
Today, Steve and I are going to do another episode of Batman the Animated Series. We're going to watch and talk about it for you. And today we're doing It's Never Too Late. And sorry that this is coming out a little bit later in the week. We had a lot of technical difficulties the other day. Steve and I were we had crazy Skype issues. We were trying to record this. We actually did it parts of it a couple times, and finally we just had to give up. So anyway, but it's never too late to record a discussion about It's Never Too Late, Steve. And now we're here and ready to do it for you. So if you're going to watch it with us, make sure to grab your DVDs, your Blu-rays, get on Amazon Prime, however you plan on watching it, and get past all the menus, get to timestamp 0. And we are going to, of course, watch the entire episode and discuss it as we're going. If you are not going to watch it with us, we will do our level best to provide a little bit of context for what we're talking about so you can listen to this as a podcast. And let's go ahead and just get right into it. Steve, are you ready?
Yep, I'm all set.
All right, make sure that you're watching It's Never Too Late and press play right now. Okay, which intro did you get, Steve?
I've got Batman versus Superman, or Batman Superman. They're not fighting.
Batman versus Superman. Yeah, is that when that movie comes out? Are we gonna start accidentally doing that with everything that has both of them?
Yes.
It's just like I think we already had that with things a lot, where it's like we would accidentally put versus them. No, that means a thing. They're fighting.
Well, I mean, there's one episode where they fight, so potentially we could do it and still be right.
Steve, I think it would be really cool if instead of just the 2 intros, you had like 8 or 10 of them.
Yeah, just rotating Shirley Walker music.
Yeah, it was just kind of, a dice roll. Like, you never knew what you'd get. It's like opening trading cards when we were kids, with like the gum, and you'd be like, which ones am I going to get? That'd be fun, but you only have 2.
Yeah.
And half the time they give you, or more than half the time they give you the one that you don't really want because this is, early Batman and you kind of want this intro.
Yeah, exactly. The intro's half the feel.
Yeah, it establishes the tone.
So notice this title card, though. It's a really nice title card. Especially with the train. And we'll get into what the train means later down the line because there's a lot with that. That kid is a jerk, by the way. Because did you see him threw that ball?
He just throws it over her head. I didn't notice that until you said that. Jerk. He should have just thrown his hands in the air and been like, ha ha. He should have been like that kid from The Simpsons, like, ha ha. Well, the train motif is a thing that comes up a lot in this show. We've already seen it quite a bit.
Yeah, it's a common Batman thing. Grant Morrison's Batman's got that for transformative experiences. Another mistake is they misspelled commissioner.
That's hilarious. We'll talk about Commissioner Gordon's hair a little bit later. It's a thing that I never noticed real hard until this episode when Harvey Bullock brings it up. And once you see it, you can't stop seeing it. Like, how did that hairstyle happen? He's got like an ice cream cone. He's got like the top of an ice cream cone on his head.
Yeah, like someone just shaved whipped cream on top of there. So this is my only criticism of the episode, the major one that we'll get into now, I think. The newscaster says, and Gordon says, that this is young versus old. And I don't see that, because Stromwell and Thorne look about the same age, if not Stromwell younger. So there should have been something there with this design to at least set that home.
Boy, they established the crap out of the kid in that painting, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
He's really creepy looking. He reminds me of the kid, especially like the photograph of him in Brave Little Toaster.
Yeah. Yeah, and that painting looks a lot like Thomas, Martha, and Bruce Wayne too.
That's a good point. Except it's creepier somehow.
Just a little bit, yeah. In Mask of the Phantasm, that painting is reasonably creepy as well.
When you and I were talking about this episode before, Steve, you pointed out that everybody's drinking juice in this scene.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I don't know any alcohol that's that orange, so.
They could all be drinking screwdrivers.
Oh, they could be, actually.
They could be screwdrivers.
Potentially, yeah. Although, I don't know why everyone on the table were drinking screwdrivers, and Batman as well. Well, Batman's in disguise in this episode. That's something I wanted to point out, is Bruce Wayne in disguise as other people is really cool. I love it when he does that. I don't think he's done Matches Malone in the episodes we've covered yet, but I know he gets that later.
It's cool that he has different aliases, that it's not always Matches Malone.
Yeah.
Like, we use Matches Malone a lot because it's kind of a motif and he uses it a lot. It's kind of cool that like he has like a particular one he does, but you wouldn't want to do it the same one too often. Like
Yeah.
it seems like you would only want to use that one if you were building a history for that character
Yeah, and they
that you
utilize
could
that pretty well every
use.
now and then. Like Morrison uses it, Brave and the Bold uses it, and it's always for a guy that needs to be showy and not someone that needs information.
Well, I would assume that sometimes Matches Malone probably has covers where like people actually know that guy,
Yeah, probably. Um,
but I don't know if he's ever used like that.
uh, so here we're into the first flashback. So these are done really, really well. We've already talked about like how this show is great for like for aesthetic stuff, with the color changes and the way the lens sometimes look and like the distortions. Um, but what they do here with these two kids and how Stromwell is constantly saying that someday he's gonna own this town, and what that ultimately means for his character later down the line, all that's set up really well, and it doesn't feel like you're getting it handed to you by having multiple flashbacks.
Yeah, this episode manages something that a lot of those early episodes, or a couple of those early episodes that we talked about, didn't get right, which is let's have some kind of mature message for especially for like the kids watching. But as you pointed out, a lot of the time it would be kind of about like just one image. Like we have this action scene, we build the whole episode around it, and this is far more cohesive than that, right? Like this is really well interwoven. Where this is an actual story, this is an actual character arc. We actually have a beginning, middle, and end here. And when we talk about episodes that get a lot done in 22 minutes, this is one of those.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like really dense.
Yeah, definitely true. In this episode, they built it around a character and his arc, and they made it almost very Christmas Carol Scroogey, where the point of the story is that we have a character that we were trying to change beginning, middle, and end. And Batman acts a lot like his guardian angel, going around and showing him different areas, whether intentional or not, that ultimately lead to his change.
This is, you could almost make the case that this is like a second formula structure for this show where you have the episodes, and they did more of them early. You have the
Yeah.
episodes that are built like a Fleischer cartoon, like we keep saying, where it's, and interestingly, both of these are Batman kind of, acts but doesn't talk a lot, right?
Right.
And these are not the only two, but they're just two that we can talk about. So one is the kind of Fleischer thing where we have a pretty simple action setup. There's a clear bad guy. Batman goes and stops him, and it's mostly action driven. But there's maybe one cool idea that's behind it. This is more like a one and done 22-page comic book
Yeah.
where it's one single story. It doesn't really influence an overall continuity all that much, and it's not about Batman. It's Batman influencing somebody else, but who he is like inherently in the actions that he makes, and it's more about how he affects this other protagonist. And I just think it's really interesting because these are 22-minute episodes, and in a screenplay, usually one page is 1 minute. So we have essentially a 22-page comic book
Yeah. Yeah.
playing out here, and I think I love those kinds of episodes when that works.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's more like an 8-minute Fleischer cartoon stretched to 22 minutes. Is
Yeah.
kind of the distinction I'm making.
Yeah, no, you're right. And they don't pad this episode out with anything. They're jam packing it with a lot of stuff, and Batman doesn't have any dialogue except for say one or two lines. Batman's really minimal in this. He's just mostly doing detective work or carrying Stromwell around. But they're still able to build a mystery and a mythos around his character, and even some kind of, if you've never read a Batman story before, you can make certain assumptions about what he cares about and what he values and what he's trying to do, and they could even be competing ones. Like what we're about to get here with Stromwell and his kid, we could say that that's what Batman's guiding, or it could also just be Batman's trying to alleviate this gang war. But either way, they both work.
Yeah, and see, that was my initial read on it. That like you can kind of look at this as Batman is just trying to save this kid, but it seems more likely to me that there's this gang war that's brewing on the horizon, and he's using what he knows to his advantage. So to fix that much larger problem for the city, and of course Batman, unless he just happens upon a smaller case, is usually about the bigger issues. The bigger cases, the city on the whole, right? And
Yeah.
so it seems I think either is possible, but it seems more likely to me that I like that we don't know actually, but it seems likely to me that like Batman comes into this and he says, if I help save this man's soul, we can fix this problem because that takes him off the board. He's not going to be this mob boss that is fighting against Thorn anymore.
Yeah, and saving his
Take him
soul
off the
is a really
board.
apt line because this episode's got a lot of religious symbolism in it, and we'll talk about near the end whether or not any of that's necessary or works. But yeah, I like that you mentioned that because there's a good number of episodes where Batman's saving the small guy, he's saving their souls in a way like Appointment in Crime Alley has got Batman saving individuals every now and then.
Yeah.
So clearly Batman cares about the little person, but he's putting that kind of care and effort into a bigger fish. And so it leaves it a little bit more ambiguous and it makes Batman more mysterious and makes his methodology almost seem more methodical. Um,
Well, and in a way, this episode, this particular story could be told with any sort of pulp hero because you essentially have a pulp story here, right? I
yeah.
mean, like it's like the phantom in the wings in the background, that like affects things without being seen. By the way, that guy in the hat has the silliest lines.
Yes. That's heavy. Yeah.
like the pseudo beatnik guy.
Yeah.
That felt really out of place when I watched this.
Yeah. If he
It,
didn't look so
because
strange, it would have been all right. But he's got like bright orange hair and he's got the most bright colored jacket and everything.
yeah, here comes that really hilarious bit with Bullock talking about Gordon's hair. It looked better on TV. Oh man, that thing, it looks so weird when he gets right in profile, like
Yeah.
right in the front when it's just like when it's up like this, it's like a swan or something.
It's like upside down Superman hair. It's like he was trying to do the Superman curl, but he fell asleep on it.
Or like he turned his toupee over backwards and they decided, no, that looks good. I like that. I'll use that. That's so weird.
Um,
It is more prominent in this episode than I remember it in others. And then I'm sure we'll keep watching. We'll go, nah, they're drawing it even bigger. Now it's like a ferret on his head.
I remember in the first produced episode in on Leather Wings, there's actually like Gordon's got giant hair because of animation mistakes. Um,
It is a silly design. I mean, it looks like he could jump up onto trees and hook it on the ends of them and like swing off of trees.
he could be his own superhero. Why does he need Batman?
Yeah, he could do like the Diddy Kong thing without a tail. He's like, nah, Diddy Kong, I can play your video game with my hands behind my back.
Um,
I love. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, sorry, I was just gonna mention I love the transitions in this episode. How we keep going back to the moon and then cutting over to another shot.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
So that's something I noticed before, but it happened twice in a row where we get from Gordon to Thorn and then from Thorn to Batman, and they use the same shot of the moon.
I don't want to read too much into that. I'm not sure that that's a motif or that it's just part of the ambiance. This is one of those episodes that's really atmospheric. It's really gritty.
Yeah.
I dig that. I think that this is a really good example of one of those episodes that you want the animation cells to not be clean. Like this one would not have the same effect if it had been done on digitally.
Yeah, and importantly, it also wouldn't have looked as good in the Superman style either. Like, this is not a Superman story. It doesn't work with that bright color scheme. It
Great
doesn't work
point.
with the way the upbeat music and stuff works in that show. This is like an inherently gritty story. Uh,
And not that we haven't had a couple of those before, but this one I think works a little bit better because there was kind of an odd juxtaposition with something like the Underdwellers, right? Where
yeah,
like it's done more in that Superman format. If we're talking about Fleischer, it's done a little bit more in that format, but it's trying to be this kind of dark and gritty Superman. I think in a lot of ways this is that done right. It's not the same story by any stretch of the imagination,
right.
but it's what the city is doing to children, and or at least to this one specific kid, and it's it's really, I really love how this character arc plays out with Stromwell, where he thinks that Thorne has kidnapped his kid, and he's actually responsible for all these horrible things that are happening to him and his family.
Yeah. And you gotta even extrapolate that to being that from Stromwell doing this to his own kid, that there is a greater message about kids and drugs or just kids and this city. They're
Yeah.
really clean about that. And it helps because Thorne isn't exactly humanized in this episode. Thorne's got nothing going for him except like menacing he's going to be the big crime boss thing. But that ultimately works in this episode's favor because it's allowed Stromwell to look more human and it makes the kid and everyone else involved in it more symbolic because we're talking about really big ideas with one very human person.
Yeah, you could make the case that Thorne is really two-dimensional and that he's kind of just your typical mob boss, and that just because we have a more humanized guy here, and you know the title, the message is spelled out there. It's obvious.
Yeah.
It's never too late to do the right thing. This guy, even with this drug culture that he's created and this terrible empire that he's built, he still has the choice to do the right thing. Just because you have that doesn't immediately humanize Thorne. Just because you're in a universe where a guy like this exists, but it does tell you, because I think it's done so well, and I want to talk about this scene here in a second, that maybe Thorne is a three-dimensional person and we just haven't spent enough time with him yet.
Yeah.
You know, we don't know what happened in his background. This isn't focused on him. It's just, if we saw Stromwell outside of this story, he'd look like Thorne.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's weird because I think they missed a really big opportunity of making Thorne like this because there's never an episode where he's humanized. He's usually always the big generic mob boss.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, for anyone that's wondering, we just got past that scene where Stromwell pulls a gun on him and Thorne's men are attacking the building. But importantly, we're well over 15 minutes into this episode, and Stromwell still hasn't had his big turn of corner yet.
No, and in fact, he was just about to shoot Batman.
Yeah, exactly. He was about to get away with this. He's got this weird mentality of I can quit any time almost.
Yes, it's almost as if his work is an addiction, just like the drugs are.
Yeah.
Is it isn't it really cool that they pushed the envelopes to a degree of doing drug culture in this show for kids in like the 12th episode they produced?
Yeah, and it's different
That's
for
really
this
cool.
show too, because the other ones like Superman and X-Men and stuff, it's more fantastical. But you're doing like an inherently realistic story with realistic consequences, and there's no
Yeah.
filters for it at all.
No, we're not candy coating it, and it's still kid friendly in the sense that I think kids can watch this and not be like freaked out and disturbed, and it like keeps them up at night in a bad way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the lesson is a good one. I love that Batman jump. That looks so good.
Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
But like it's it's a it's a good. I don't think it's a heavy-handed message, and part of the reason is because, as you said, the guy, it's not a light switch. The guy sees his kid being ruined by these drugs, and he still is arrogant enough to think that he can control the situation. And I think a lot of it is you have power, you don't want to lose that power, and you get used to the lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so you put yourself in this kind of place of denial and overconfidence, or at least feigning overconfidence. Is he really that confident, or is he just like resisting change? And ultimately, it's at the end realizing that he's done this to everyone in his life from when he was a kid.
Yeah, that's true. He's got a lot in common with Scrooge in that way too, right? Like Scrooge started as an okay kid, and this guy started as an okay kid, but there's an inherent need to be something more, or just something that's already lacking that's developed. And he keeps getting opportunities where this could change. He keeps getting faced with challenges, whether it's the train or Thorne or Batman, and he can't stop himself from making the wrong decisions over and over again.
That's a great point. It's an ambition thing. It's a corruption thing.
Yeah. And we'll get to that more with the train. I feel like I almost made your point for you, and I'm sorry, but I feel like
that's okay.
We're about to analyze that a little bit. And maybe this is stretching, but it seems like the beginning with Batman and getting the flashbacks with what the gang war started is the ghost of Christmas past. The kid is the ghost of Christmas present, and then now with the priest who's his brother is the ghost of Christmas future.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's going too far into it, but it really feels like.
Yeah, I don't know if that's intentional. I want to mention visually that there's a really effective thing that's done all the way through this episode, and that is these shots where it looks like there's almost Vaseline on the lens.
Yeah.
I really like that, and I'm not talking about the flashbacks here, where there's a little bit of that, but like a little bit. That's more of like that looking at things in the past from like a nostalgic lens. So you have like the kind of bits that are brighter and it still looks a little fuzzy. But like you got these places where with Batman in the present that look like we just smeared something on the lens. And I just think that's really effective for this kind of gritty feel.
Yeah.
How do you read the train, Steve? Because it's clearly a symbol, and I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it.
Yeah. Initially, just my thought with the way the first two flashbacks work is the train would be Gotham City itself, and so this kid's growing up and saying someday I'm going to own this city or something. I'm going to own this town. And the city is constantly where he lives. The city's where all of his crime and stuff works. But the city, in its own way, is out to kill him as well. Between Thorn and Batman, and so the kid's already made his decision of what he wants, and then he faces it head on with the train. And because he got lucky, he thinks he's able to conquer it, but he never fully realizes the gravity of that situation. It's an old, powerful, it's a steam train. It's gonna get him no matter what. But just by happenstance or luck, he keeps resisting the change that's inevitable. He doesn't have the power of the train, but he thinks he does.
Yeah, and I had a different read on it, but I think yours is really good. I saw it kind of because I think the fact that there's a second train that you didn't see in the first place is really important.
Yeah.
I saw it more like the the train it symbolizes like his choices in his career, kind of where there's he put himself in the path of this train and he had the chance to fix that problem and just get out of the way of it, but there's always another train, and he keeps compounding these problems by refusing to stop what he's doing. So like there's always another train, but like we look at these bullet trains almost like they're a force of nature, but importantly they were man-made, so you can stop them. And that might be reading too much into that, but I think it's kind of interesting that like he thinks that there is that he has the power to solve these problems himself, even though he's constantly compounded them, and so clearly he needs to just quit.
Right.
But B, that maybe at the exact same time he just he's at a point of no return. He can't stop. It is too late. And so I like that. You have that second train where it's like there's always another one.
Yeah.
If only you would stop it, the train, or get out of the way of it. But anyway.
Yeah. No, you're right. It's fascinating. It's a really nicely loaded symbol.
That's a dense episode, man.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites. I don't watch it a lot, but every time you do, it just kind of sticks in your memory.
That is one that I did not see when I was a kid. I didn't see it until I got older.
Yeah. They didn't. I don't think they reran this one a lot either. Just because it was so different from what they were doing later with Justice League and Superman and stuff. It just felt like they didn't have a reason to rerun it. But it is really good. The only other criticism I think we might want to mention is, does it need the religious metaphor? Because I wouldn't have thought about it if the final shot of the episode wasn't the church.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm not sure that it needs that either. When we talked about this before, you mentioned that there was a movie that was suspiciously similar.
Yeah, it's called Angels with Dirty Faces, and it's essentially the same story of a kid that grows up to be a mob boss, and his friends grows up to be a priest, and their whole ability to reconcile or not, and eventually it ends with the mob boss going to his friend and accepting what he told him from the very beginning, and it's never too late to change. But they don't heavy-hand the religious metaphor in there. All they do really, because that period of film did it a lot, is they bash gangsters. Because a lot of those movies like Public Enemy would end with a disclaimer that says gangsters are the scum of the earth and you should hate them and yada, yada, yada.
Wow.
But it does that, but it doesn't do the religious thing anywhere nearly as explicit as this episode does it.
The only thing I can see, I mean, like it kind of just feels like it's part of the atmosphere it's maybe not necessary, but like it just kind of fits with the vague symbol of like Batman as a guardian angel, that kind of thing. But if there's, I don't know if there's any read to put on it at all, it's like repentance.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's this priest is willing to forgive this guy. That maybe is supposed to symbolize that like God or the universe or however you want to look at it it gives everyone the ability to repent and redeem themselves no matter how many horrible things they've done. So I mean, like maybe the religious thing is just kind of, it's not subtly there. I mean, it's pretty implicit. You're right. But I mean, like explicit. Excuse me. But I mean, like maybe it's just maybe it's just that. Maybe it's just that that like it symbolizes you've it's not possible to go too far and not be able to fix your life in some way or redeem yourself because there's still some good left in everybody. One thing that I didn't mention, and I mean, like, this is one of those episodes where I feel like I wish we'd watched it twice in a row and just kept talking about it. Yeah. But I like that we've twice in a row gotten, we had Two-Face last time.
Yeah.
And we've gotten 2 episodes that take a character who's corrupted and dirty and messed up, but he's not the antagonist of the piece, and bad guys in this Batman universe can be real people. They're not always just the thing to make conflict happen.
Yeah, they're not all the Joker. And it's great that this one came out of after Two-Face, because that's the one villain Batman can't redeem, but he tries more so than with any other character. So we've finally got Batman a success story, and it's almost a little bit bittersweet because it's not going to work with Two-Face, and it works as almost a vague continuity for those episodes.
Yeah, and that's really cool. Because I think, did they establish Thorn there in the first place?
Yes.
In Two-Face, that's what I thought.
Yeah, because I was looking through the past episodes. That's the first episode Thorn appeared is Two-Face. So this is his second episode. So yeah, I guess that would be the carryover.
It's kind of cool that you got him in the very next episode. It would have been neat if they had kind of subtly done an arc where these are all still standalone and you can watch them in any order, but we keep getting Thorn.
Yeah, and they do more with Thorn as it goes on, but they never do more than just he's the generic mob boss.
Yeah, they never take him to a place.
Yeah, it's gonna be kind of sad next week when we do I've Got Batman in My Basement. That's just so far and away from what we were doing the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, but then we get Heart of Ice right after that. So
yeah, that's true.
So you gotta spend money to make money, Steve.
Yeah, fair enough.
Well, anyway, everybody, thanks always for watching Bat Chat. Sure hope you enjoyed it, and we love to hear what you thought of this episode if you watched it. So leave your comments. We will see you again next week for a lot of people's least favorite episode of this series. I've Got Batman in My Basement, and interesting that I think that was the introduction of Penguin in the show.
I think it was, yeah.
Everybody hates it, yeah.
Anyway, Penguin didn't exactly get a lot to do in this series either.
He did, and I mean, his portrayal in this, I think, is good, but you're right, he doesn't get great episodes.
No, and we'll go on and we'll talk about this with other episodes, but there's a good number of villains in this series that are performance only, and everything else is just not as good as you remember it. Scarecrow is not nearly as well developed as people think he is. Man-Bat isn't. Penguin isn't. Riddler isn't.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I guess we'll talk about that as we go on.
All right, well, thanks again for watching, folks. We sure appreciate it. I am Captain Logan.
I'm Steve Baxley.
And we'll see you again next week.